The I in the INVEST guidelines for writing high-quality user stories stands for independent. An independent user story can be estimated, developed, tested, and demonstrated independently. This allows it to be positioned in the product backlog by its priority, independently valued, and not dependent on any other user story before it can be implemented. According to the INVEST guidelines, a high-quality user story can be understood, implemented, tested, and demonstrated on its own. It can also be independently valued by itself in the product backlog. This allows it to move up and down in the product backlog as its priority changes, without affecting any other user stories. We want the priority to drive when the user story is implemented. So if its priority goes lower, it goes lower in the backlog. And as its priority goes up, it can be moved up in the backlog so it is implemented sooner. When a user story is worked, should be based on its priority, independent of other user stories in the backlog. If user stories are dependent on each other, the dependency will determine when the user story is worked, rather than the priority. In the beginning, you want to write user stories to establish the system's foundation. These early user stories will deliver a slice of functionality to the user that is demonstratable. After that, each story will be somehow dependent on functionality or architecture being in place. This is sequential dependency, which is expected. The base functionality will need to be delivered first before the enhanced features or error paths that depend on it. However, even with the sequential dependency on existing infrastructure, each user story should contain an independent feature slice. So what do I mean by that? Here's our epic for website customer personal portal experience. Looking at its children, we see user registration here at the top. Now this is a user story that's going to deliver value to the customer. They're going to be able to register themselves with a user ID and password. And this also includes infrastructure layer slices, some enhancements to them. You're going to need some enhancements to the GUI, to the database. There's going to be logic in there. So this is a vertical feature slice through the horizontal infrastructure layers. We want our stories to represent both demonstratable functionality and infrastructure enhancements that by itself delivers value to the customer. Independent feature slices of functionality mean a feature may need several user stories to be complete. Here we have the user registration, then we have user view registration, modify registration, and delete registration. All four of those will need to be done before the registration feature is complete. This is a sequential dependency. Because these are sliced, so the base functionality in US 49 is seen as system foundation for the view, modify, and delete user stories. These user stories, though related, are independent of each other, each describing an atomic unit of work. We don't want the concepts described in the user stories to overlap with concepts in other user stories. Each user story should be independently valuable, delivering demonstratable value on its own. What we want to eliminate are non-valued dependencies. This often shows up as infrastructure stories. For example, look down here at US 29. Register customer comments on plan information. As a registered online user, I want to be able to contribute my own observations about specific plants, so the plant data is more comprehensive and everyone can see my comments. Okay, that's a feature that's going to deliver value to the user. But look right above it. It says update database to store customer comments. Well, if we look at that user story, as an administrator, I want to be able to store customer comments in the database so I can display them with the plan information. Well, for the customer to be able to contribute their comments, this is definitely going to have to be there. We're going to need the database schema updated so we can store the comments. So there's a dependency there. However, this does not deliver value to the user. This is just a slice of the infrastructure. So this is a non-valued dependency. We can't deliver registering customer comments until we've delivered US 54, but doing US 54 is giving us no value. The same thing is happening up here in US 28 and 26. The user authentication with personal portal, They want to be able to log on with their user ID and password so they can get to the personal portal. But right above it, the administrator wants to be able to store the customer's user ID and password so they can be authenticated when they try to log into the website. Well, just storing a user ID and password does not give value, and you can only demonstrate it by showing the database. This should probably get combined with the user registration, because then you would have a vertical slice through the infrastructures. You'd be able to show a user registration, and the horizontal infrastructure slice of storing it in the database would be part of that. The I in the INVEST guidelines stands for independent, where each user story can stand on its own and can be developed, tested, and delivered independently. Related but independent user stories can be combined within a single sprint, or they can be split across different iterations, depending on their priority. That's the flexibility delivered by writing independent user stories. And with independent user stories, the product increment will be potentially shippable at any point in development without requiring or being dependent on another user story's functionality.